Hi everybody, it's Sam from Over Renewables and welcome to another project that we've completed out here in York. Nice local one for us in our hometown, but you can see we've got this beautiful newly built garage behind us, and it's on this garage that we've installed 5 340 watt in-roof Viridian solar panels. It's probably one of the smallest systems that we've completed. Those panels are coupled up with a SolarEdge 1.5 kilowatt inverter, and we're going to show you how a system that is quite small compared to the 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 16 kilowatt systems that we normally install, how a system like this can still benefit a property. You don't have to have loads and loads of panels to still make a difference, but let's get into it. So before we go into seeing what this install looks now, let's step back in time. Let's go through the magic door to see what the system was like when we first started, what this building was like. Yeah, so let's step back in time. Right, so we're up on the roof now. We've made a start. We've got 3 of the 5 panels already installed. So I thought I'd show you a little bit how these flashings go together, why we like this system, and how it all fixes down and is nice and secure to your roof. Like I say, we've got 3 of these Viridian 340 watt G1 panels. So they screw down to the roof, which I'll show you in a minute. But the key thing about this system is that you don't see any fixings when it's done. So you may have seen the panels that are in roof that have the little clamps visible, which are fine. But the real appeal to this is that you don't see anything other than the flashings themselves and the panels. So you don't have any little bolts sticking up, you don't see any bits of fixings or anything like that, no conduits, nothing. It's just a really clear line solution, which is why they call it the clear line solution. So I'll show you this gutter now, because this is a perfect example of how all of the flashings go together and the little bit that's special about these panels. Before I take you close up, the main part that's special about these panels is that they've got a seal inbuilt. So that seal is what these flashings push into. So the seal along the edge of the panel accepts this flashing, literally just push this flashing into it, and that flashing is then secured to that panel. So that is what's really special about this system, so I'll show you. So this is the channel, like I mentioned, and we've got a gutter that runs from top to bottom on this panel. And then on the sides, you can see on one side of here, we've got our flashing already in place, so you don't see any fixings, you don't see anything, it's all waterproofed. On this side, we haven't got the flashing in yet. That's what we're going to put in a second. But can you see this yellow seal that runs up all the way up the panel? When I slide this up here, this top edge here pushes into that seal. So I'm not going to push it right in now because we've got to put some lubrication in it because it's fairly tight, obviously, to make sure that it doesn't fall out. But that sits in, and then you've got a completely waterproof gutter then. It's all aluminium fixings, so it's just going to last forever. So we really like the system. But I'll show you one that we've done earlier, sort of Blue Peter style, and you can see the final result. So this is one that we did earlier, so you can see all the way up there, yes, you see no fixings, you don't see anything other than just black flashing. That is completely watertight now and just provides such a lovely finish to the solar panel install. Okay, so how do we fix these panels down? So you can see the roof is felted and battened, so that is when we need to come back and we need to fit the panels to the roof. So the Viridian panel sits directly onto the battens, as you can see. Then we've got 3 of these either side, so there's 6 of these that go onto the panel. And then there's a maximum of 2 of these, top and bottom, a minimum of 1. It all depends where the rafter falls. So I'll show you these now. So we've got 3 of these up the side, so they just click into a little indent here and sit onto the actual batten itself. We've then got, on the inside of there, we've got 2 screw holes. So they then screw to these battens here. And so we've got 3 of those, top, middle and bottom. We've then got these ones that go at the top and the bottom. So I won't obviously put this in the bottom because we've got the flashing on, but it effectively goes into the bottom there, fixes in, and then we screw that down into the actual rafter. So it doesn't go into the batten, it goes into the rafter at the bottom and at the top. So you can see there that we can have a maximum of 10 fixings onto each panel, because we've got 3 either side, that's 6, and then 2 top and bottom, another 4. So that is solid. I've never known another fixing system be that well fixed down. So that means that there's no rattling, there's nothing when you have this system in. It's absolutely rock solid. So once we've got these in, as I've mentioned, we then have the flashing that comes down and hides all of these fixing points. So these ones here are hidden underneath this bottom flashing, and then the ones at the top flashing, and then we've got these ones here are hidden by those middle flashings. So it's just a really great system that is absolutely rock solid once you've got it screwed down. Right, so I've nipped down from the roof and we're inside this garage now. So this is where we're going to have the inverter. This is also where we're going to put our power optimizer. So if you've had a look at a couple of other of our videos, you'll have noticed that we put 1 power optimizer per panel. This one's a little bit different. Because this is only a small little 1.5 kilowatt system, we're actually using 1 power optimizer that has multiple inputs. So that is going to go directly above us. And if we just take a look up directly above us, you can see that the panels that we fitted, we've actually poked the cables through the fold in the felt. So we've not jeopardized the water barrier of the felt. We've come up through the fold, and each one of these panels has 2 cables, positive and negative, and we're going to bring all of those cables through and make the power optimizer connection inside the garage. So that just means that if that power optimizer ever fails, or we need to test a panel without removing it, then we can test all that from inside here. So that's a great little tip if you are looking at fitting in-roof solar, is if you can, bring the cables through into the loft, or, well, in this case, the garage. So that is a really good little tip. But the guys are up on the roof, they're going to get the rest of the panels on, and then we can start wiring in here. But I'll show you the power optimizer that we're going to fit, and also where we're going to put this solar PV inverter. So this is the power optimizer. You'll notice, again, if you've seen some of our videos, that this is kind of double the size of a normal one. So you can see we've got multiple inputs here. So effectively, each one of the panels will go into this, one of these inputs. We've then got a negative and a positive that goes back to the inverter. So all we need to do is mount this and then plug each panel into the input and then wire it back to the inverter. That'll then work to optimize this system and provide top level monitoring as to how the panels are working, if there's a fault with the panel, and gives us a pinpoint accuracy as to which panel is faulty or is struggling to generate. And then we can either check, make sure it isn't covered in bird mess, it isn't cracked, it isn't, whatever. It gives us that pinpoint monitoring. So that's why we love SolarEdge. So I'll show you where the inverter's going. In this garage, as well as the panels, we're putting the inverter as well, and a few other components, which I'm going to show you now. So you can see here we've got our fireboard. So we pretty much 9 times out of 10 mount the inverter and all the other switchgear on the fireboard. It is designed for properties that maybe you've been mounting the inverter on a wooden wall or something like that that isn't fire retardant, whereas in this, obviously it's a brick wall, so it's not 100% needed for the fire part of it. However, we still mount it because it just looks so much neater. It gives us a good surface to clip to as well, and fix the isolators and stuff that I'm going to show you now. So we've got the fireboard, which is just the amount of messages I get on Instagram about the fireboards. There are 12mm 800 by 1200 hardy backer board, and they're used for tiling. So there you go. I'm just going to send you a link to this video next time someone asks. But yeah, you can get them from Selco, B&Q, MKM, loads of places. So that's what we use. We've then got this compact SolarEdge inverter. That is a 1.5 kilowatt inverter and just has the one input here for the panels, and that is going to mount onto our fireboard. So that's the first and arguably most important piece of equipment. That's the first bit. We've then got, between our fuse board that ADS has installed, our friends at ADS Electrical, we're going to install a rotary AC isolator. So that is going to go in line with the consumer unit and the circuit that they've given us for the solar, as well as a generation meter. So this generation meter just logs everything that the solar produces, and it's required under MCS. So we install the AC isolator first, then the generation meter, and then out to the inverter. So that's all there is on the AC side for the solar to work. We've then got, on the DC side, we've got a similar isolator for the DC strings. So they come down from that optimizer that we're going to mount up in this loft area and into a DC isolator that then comes out of that DC isolator into the inverter. So then we've got isolation that we can do on the AC and the DC side to completely remove any power from that inverter. Because obviously the DC is live during daylight, so there's not a huge amount we can do about that. SolarEdge will only allow 1 volt per panel to come down to the inverter, but still it's just nice to be able to isolate it and make sure that everyone's safe when they're working on it. Or an electrician needs to isolate it because they're working on this fuse board in the garage. Just 2 isolators and it'll turn off. The next part is a SolarEdge Modbus. So we're installing this because the customer wants to be able to track what they're importing, what they're exporting, how much of their solar power they have used, how much they've sent back to the grid, and basically get a bit of an idea as to how much power their home is using and how much use they're getting from the solar, because that might help change habits to make sure that the customer is using everything that their investment is providing them with. Because obviously if you've got your washing machine and you always do it overnight, you've done it like that for the past 10 years, with something like this, you can actually start to see how much that is costing you in relation to actually putting the washing machine on during the middle of the day. So that is a really good feature, and I'd really recommend, if you are getting SolarEdge, to get the Energy Modbus, because it just gives you so much data. It also gives us so much data if you decide to go down the battery route in the future. So there, that's going to go either here or in the house. We've just got to have a look at how we're going to wire it. That is coupled with a CT clamp. So I'll get this one out for you. That is covered with a CT clamp, so that wires into that Modbus, and this goes round the main incoming tails to the property. So that will then monitor either power going into the house and being bought from the grid, or power going that way and it's sending power back to the grid because it's not being used from the solar. So that is what measures where the power's going. So that is a very important piece of kit. So yes, that'll be coupled with the Energy Modbus. So I'll show you now where we're actually going to position the inverter, because that is going just on this wall just here. Right, so this is where we're going to put the SolarEdge inverter on that big fireboard. So that's going to go onto this wall here. Then we're basically going to clip our AC cable into this consumer unit that ADS Electrical has installed for us. And then that's just that is the route that the solar will take to send the power back into the house and supply electric in here. ADS are installing a Zappi here as well, so that is going to supply the customer's new electric vehicle, and is really the real reason that they've built this garage, as it'll provide a nice, safe, secure place for the car, nice place to charge it, and a route for some solar panels to be installed to help them reduce the amount of power that car eats from the house. So yeah, should be a really nice little job, this one. From the house, they've ran a 16mm SWA 3-core, so they've put a really big chunky supply in, because it is quite a long route and we need to make sure our volt drop is very low for solar. And we've then got some, we've got an internet cable, Cat6 internet cable. We've also got another Cat6 cable which is going to allow the Modbus to be installed, so that is going to be the communication wire between the inverter and the Modbus. So yeah, should be good. We're going to crack on and get this system installed. So you can just about see here, we've got the 5 Viridian in-roof solar panels on this beautiful slate roof. So the builder has made such a beautiful job of this, and the in-roof Viridian system just complements a slate roof above anything else really. You can see that the panels are just slightly above the surface of the slate, but they are inset into the roof. So the slating goes all the way around the outside of the system and flashes up to some metal flashings along the sides and along the top. On the bottom, we've got flexible LED flashing that, in this case, because we were tight for room, we've taken directly into the gutter and brought the system down the roof. So for me, this is probably one of the best looking solar PV systems on the market. It's all completely metal, so there's no plastic parts, fire tested, all the rest of it. So yeah, really happy with this system, and we try and use the Viridian system for our in-roof installs as a standard if we can. But yeah, looks absolutely fantastic and just complements this roof so much. So we're in the garage now, and you can see we have got the perfect space for this solar inverter and all the associated isolators, meters and everything else, which I'll go through in a minute. But When we have a space like this, it's fantastic because it means we can get our full fireproof board on, or heatproof board, which is like a concrete-based board. It's actually a tile backer board. We get so many questions about that. We can put that in full, which means we've kind of got like a picture frame to put all of our equipment on and make it look nice and neat. So if I start from the bottom and work up, so we've got the, seems like famous document holder. Again, this is probably the second most asked question is, oh, where do you get your document holders from? It's the fireboard, then this, and then it's about the renewable stuff. But anyway, getting sidetracked. So this is our document holder, and within this, we keep our system schematic, which the customer has so that any other technicians that come, the DNO and anyone else that comes can see how it's all connected in. So that lives here. There's another one of those up at the house. We've then got our start-stop procedure. So this tells any electrician or anyone else that comes, the customer, how to turn the system on and off safely. So that lives in there as well. And then we've also got within that document holder manuals for the inverter, any sort of handover kit or pack. So all that can live in there, and it's all in one place. You don't end up losing it. If you're like me, you get a manual, it goes in a drawer that's a safe place, and then you never see it ever again. So we put those in just so that everything's in one nice neat space. So if we move up the board, you can see behind me here, we've got the garage consumer unit. So from that, we've come out with a double pole RCBO. That comes out into this flex and into this AC isolator. So this AC isolator provides local isolation for the system, and that's all referenced on the start-stop procedure. We then come into this generation meter, so that's logging every unit that this system has generated. It doesn't matter what they've used, it's just what they've generated that this logs. We've then got the star of the show, we've got the actual inverter. So this is one of the SolarEdge mini inverters. So this is a 1.5 kilowatt inverter, and you can see here we've got the AC input and the DC, so AC output and the DC input coming in. That comes from this DC isolator. So you can see we've got the input coming down from the panels, one string, comes down into this isolator, out the isolator and into the inverter. We've then got these lights on the inverter. We've got the blue light, which signifies that the system is online. And then we've got the green light, a solid green light to show that the system is currently generating. We'll have a little look at the app in a minute just to see how it's generating. And then we've got the programming switch just here, which provides isolation for the inverter as well as the DC isolator here, but also allows us to go into the settings and connect wirelessly to the Set app, which is like an installer-based app for us to set up the system and make sure everything's working okay. See, then we've got some stickers on here to show that not to remove these under load and that this is the inverter. So that's kind of all the components. We've then got network switch just up here, which the electricians that have done this install have installed for us, as well as a hub and a Harvey, which we haven't actually done the Zappy on this job, but it's in here and it's ready for when this customer does get an electric vehicle. All of that is on this board. They've used our board to mount that on, which we don't mind. So as well as this solar PV system that we've installed just behind me here, we've actually also installed the SolarEdge Modbus meter. So that Modbus meter is monitoring the import, export, and putting that onto the SolarEdge app, which we'll have a look at in a minute. That goes a bit beyond just installing a solar PV system. That's now more of a home energy monitoring system. The reason that we've done that is because the customer wanted to see how much energy they were saving through having the solar, how much energy they were buying in, when they were buying that in, if a battery is going to be worth it, if a hot water diverter is going to be worth it, which we can make assumptions before the install is done. But having that Modbus and that monitoring package, if you like, means that actually after a year, when you've been through all the seasons, you've had all the good weather and the bad weather, you can get a bit of an average and work out when you are generating loads and not using it, and when you're using loads and not generating it, usually over the night. However, when you've got an actual monitoring package, you can see that physically on your iPad or your desktop or whatever. So we've installed that, and we are recommending that more and more people have that Modbus meter installed, because it gives us hard evidence that a battery wouldn't be worthwhile because the system isn't really generating enough, or the customer's using all of their generation that they produce, which is kind of the case mostly in this install, because it is a 1.5 kilowatt system and not a 5 kilowatt system, something like that. So actually having that information on a laptop makes our job easier, and also means that the customer can kind of back up their decision with hard figures. So the way that we've installed that, we'll show you actually Modbus in a little while, but we've got this Cat6 cable from the inverter back to the house, because the Modbus meter has to go next to your main electricity input, so next to your meter really, and it can that's the point that it monitors your import or export. So it takes into account all the electrics in the home, and it monitors that import and export. We can have the inverter up to 150 meters away from the Modbus, so that's a really good healthy distance, and I think we are around the 100 meter distance on this anyway. It's a really long garden, so that means that it's flexible for if you do have to have your system in a remote outbuilding or garage like this, then as long as we can keep it within the 150 meters, we're fine. So we'll have a little look at that in a minute, and yeah, I'm really happy how this one turned out. So if you've seen some of our other YouTube videos, you'll know a little bit about the SolarEdge optimizers. If you haven't, this is your first one, welcome, and welcome to the world of SolarEdge. So with SolarEdge, what we do is we normally fit one optimizer per panel. That optimizer makes the solar panel smart effectively, and optimizes it if it has shading, if it's just getting less light for whatever reason, cloud cover, things like that. With this system, because it's quite small, we have to fit this this communal SolarEdge optimizer. So I'll show you that now. So this SolarEdge optimizer has all of the panels going into it, so it's basically like one big optimizer, and that collects all the information from all 5 panels and sends it back down to the inverter. So you don't end up with one optimizer per panel, you just end up with one optimizer that we've mounted inside, so it's easy to maintain for the full system. So we've made the long journey up this garden to the front of the house where the electric comes in. So here we have the SolarEdge Modbus, we have the circuit for the garage supply, which was put in by our friends at ADS Electrical. We've got the supply for the Modbus as well. So let's have a little look at what this looks like. We can see at this top right hand side we've got the switch fuse supply that was put in by ADS Electrical, and that supplies the garage. That's coming straight off the main tails. If we then move to the right hand side, we can see we've got our schematic drawing on the right hand side to show anyone how the system's all connected in, where the isolators are and everything like that. We've then got, at this far left hand side, we've then got our start stop procedure, so that anyone coming in to work on the system knows how to turn the solar PV off. If we then come towards the bottom of the cupboard, we can see we've got the SolarEdge Modbus box. So this Modbus box has within it the SolarEdge Modbus, which is monitoring the import, export, the self-consumption, and putting all that onto the app. And that's basically all we've got up here. We've got a circuit within the main house consumer unit, which supplies the SolarEdge Modbus, but other than that, it's pretty easy down this end. Okay, so we've seen the actual SolarEdge install and how we've wired everything together. But let's have a look at the app and see how this system has actually been performing. So with the SolarEdge system, you get a 25-year free access to the SolarEdge monitoring equipment. So that is what we're going to have a look at now. So the customer's app looks slightly different, but it all shows the same information. So let's have a little look at that now. So this is the customer's app. We can see here on the top left, we've got 200 watts of solar PV production. You'll see that changing throughout this video as the sun comes out, hopefully. We've then got a 300 watt consumption within the property. You can see there they've got the home symbol in the middle, and then we've got a purchase of 100 watts from the grid. So you can see now that's sort of changing around. But you can see even with a small system, we are nearly covering the full base load. It's pretty grim here today as well, so we would expect that to be a little bit more if the sun was out. If we move down, we can see that we're currently on the day tab on this top left, and we've got self-consumption on this blue bar here. We've got 100% self-consumption. That basically means that everything that the solar has produced has been used within the property. So there's no wasted power, there's 0 kilowatt hours or watt hours in this case export. We've then got a self-consumption based on the consumption. That is at 10%. So out of that 100% amount of the solar that's been produced, that equates to 10% of what the home has used with electricity in the home at the minute. So that that basically means that the 0.36 kilowatt hours that has come from the solar is offset against the 3.49 kilowatt hours that has been totally used in the property, which leaves an import of 3.13 kilowatt hours that has been purchased from the grid. But obviously that includes from midnight to now, which is, it's around about 10:30. So we've got all of that nighttime consumption, which is skewing this graph slightly, but I'll have a look at some other days in a minute. We then move down, we can see here we've got comparative energy. So we can see January, February, March, April, May, all the rest of the months, up to now, what the system has produced. So we can see, for example, in June, the system still produced, even though it's a fairly small system compared to most, that it still produced 203 kilowatt hours in June. And we've currently produced 166 kilowatt hours in July, and we're not quite through the month yet. So we can see there then as well, this blue bar, which is last year, so 2021, that it was actually installed really late on in December. So it only produced 5.19 kilowatt hours. But this will keep a log and allows us to compare year on year what the system has produced. So if we go back a day, we can see here that yesterday the system totally produced 6.34 kilowatt hours. That had a self-consumption of 33%, so 2.06 kilowatt hours, and an export of 4.28 kilowatt hours. So effectively 4.28 or 67% of what the system produced went back to the grid. So that's when the customer can start looking at it going, well, is it worth getting a battery for that, or should I get maybe an energy diverter to put energy into the hot water tank, because that's a lot cheaper and there's not a huge amount of export in terms of kilowatt hours, but it's still quite a chunk of what we generate. So that's what we will be looking at and what the customer can look at as well. We can also see that yesterday the total consumption within the home was 7.07 kilowatt hours, so still not a lot. That was what the home used no matter where the energy came from. And 29% of that came from the solar, so that's 2.06 kilowatt hours. But then 5.01 kilowatt hours, or 71%, was purchased from the grid. So we can see there that we've got this dirty grid export of 4.28 kilowatt hours, and if we could have put that into the home, then we could have nearly wiped out that import amount. It's not quite as simple as that, but we can kind of look at to go, well, okay, there's a serious amount of export compared to what we're importing. You can see on this graph below that the green is the solar, the blue is the self-consumption, so that's when the solar was supplying the house load, and then we've got the red, which is the import. So we can see there that the customer's importing in the mornings and the evenings, as you would expect, but during the day, his and her consumption is covered by the solar. Move down, we've got comparative energy once again. We can also go week, which shows you then day to day what the total amount of consumption, the solar production and the self-consumption was, month by month and year. So we can see loads of different information here, which gives us a wealth of information to look back over the system to see if a battery or a hot water diverter is worth having. We can then go to the layout. So this is quite a small solar PV system compared to most, but we can still see all the panels here and what they're producing. So this means that we can drill down into what is happening in the system, and if the customer has a fault, even though there's not many panels to look at, we can still see where that fault may be. So that's really cool. And if we change this to, say, yearly, we get a total amount of energy that each one of these panels has produced. This panel here is around double what the rest of them are, because that actually shows 2 panels. The way that this system works is we have to double up one of the panels to fit 5. So there's 4 inputs into the SolarEdge optimizer. So one of these inputs has got 2 panels in stock. That's why that one's doubled. But we know where they are, and we know what's happening there. So if we go back, we can see now we are producing 0.18 kilowatts or 0.16 kilowatts, so 160 watts. The home has increased slightly at 0.34 kilowatts, and the home is now purchasing 0.18 kilowatts. So that shows that it's quite a live readout as well. I wish it was a lot sunnier today, but it's raining here. So we can still see, even in the rain, it's still producing a chunk of energy, not covering the full load at this point, but like we've seen on some of these graphs, there are points where if there is a bit of sun like this one, or this one, or that one, there is a chance that there is a very high chance that this system produces more than what the home needs at that time. So yeah, we can go back through quite a lot of these and see that the solar during the day is producing more than what the home requires, and that would be a perfect opportunity to put some sort of a diverter in. The customer has got a MyEnergy Zappy, so the Zappy might be able to utilise that surplus when the customer gets a electric vehicle. So that's not the end of the world. They have already got something in the future would be able to do what I'm talking about, but in the short term, something like a hot water diverter might well be a good choice. And that's about it really for the system. All the information there on the app, nice and easy for the customer and for ourselves to log in and see what's happening in the system. There we are then, that's that project wrapped up. Hopefully you can see from this video that you don't have to have loads and loads of panels with a really big expensive system to make a difference. Obviously the more energy you can generate, the better, but it's about being efficient with the roof space you've got. And to take into account aesthetics, that's why I've used these Viridian panels. If you've got any questions, then please feel free to drop them in the comments, and as ever, please like, subscribe, share, send it to your mum, send it to your dad, all the rest of that, and we'll catch you on the next video. Thanks very much.